come.
Yo guys, what is up? Max in our video, and today we're talking about Immortals of Aveum. Now, before we get into the video, huge thanks to EA who flew me out to California to go and play this game. This video is sponsored by them, but I got to sit down and play for about 3 hours of Immortals of Aveum, which is a new first-person magic shooter from the studio, Ascendant Studios. This is their first game, and today I'm going to give you guys an overview of the game, what it actually is, as well as my opinions and impressions of it over my 3 hours of playing. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Let's get right into it. So when we first got to the event, the devs sat us down and gave us a presentation on their vision for the game. The developers, if you did not know, Ascendant Studios, come from a background of making Call of Duty campaigns, and they said the vision for this game was Call of Duty but with spells, dragons instead of helicopters. They want this universe/story that they're creating to feel like Lord of the Rings meets the Marvel Universe. And while I absolutely got the Call of Duty with spells, I didn't get quite enough of the story to really validate the Lord of the Rings meets the Marvel side, but it was definitely going over the top with kind of these big battles and big cutscenes. Speaking of spells, that was one of the first things they clarified with us. So there are 3 kinds of magic in this game: blue, green, and red. And that is actually what they are called in the game. It is blue magic, red magic, green magic. Now, for each of these categories, these spells and these schools of magic operate differently. So for blue magic, that's going to be long-range magic. Think DMRs. They described the blue magic as like handguns from Destiny. They're weighty, they have high recoil, they deal big long-range damage. Within these schools of magic, you've got 3 archetypes: your basic attacks, or your normal attack, which is just you shooting spells out of your sigil. You've also got a control spell. So for blue, this was the whip or the lash that you could grab enemies and pull them in. And then you had your fury spell. This was your mana spender. And for the blue school, it was sending out a giant boulder that would travel underground and spike up and hit enemies. The purpose of this was to deal AoE damage, but it was also specialized to break enemy shields. Sometimes enemies would put down these magic barriers, and this was the spell that you'd use to break them. Green magic, on the other hand, is rapid fire and homing. Think submachine guns. Think the Needler from Halo. This was probably my favorite school of magic just because it was homing, and when I was playing on controller, and I didn't really notice any aim assist. I was kind of messing around for quite a while trying to get my aim to feel good, and so I defaulted to the green magic because it had that homing. So yeah, all the gameplay you're going to see is on controller, and I don't know if they're adding aim assist to the full launch, but I definitely wasn't really feeling any when I was playing, so that's why I ended up using a lot of green magic. But green magic's control spell, you fire out these slowing blobs of green magic that will slow enemies down and disorient them. And then lastly, your fury spell, your mana spending spell, you send out a torrent of seeking projectiles that would go and hit enemies. And in the skill tree, when I built it up, I was able to add corrosive damage. So not only would it hit enemies, but it would also deal it damage over time, which was pretty cool. We'll talk more about the skill trees later. Lastly, there is red magic. Red magic was very much like using a shotgun. Think close range, think big burst / AoE, but really, really limited range. It was high damage, but you had to be right up close to enemies. Now, the control spell for red magic was Disrupt, which was a beam that stuns and disorients enemies, and your mana spending spell was a AoE Nova called Blast Wave that hits enemies around you. And then lastly, you had an ultimate spell. This was your you kill up a bunch of enemies, you build up resource, and then you can cast this ultimate spell, which was a Iron Man beam from your chest, but beam from your fingertips because you are a mage. That was pretty cool. Did a lot of damage. I didn't use it all that much, but when there was an elite or a boss, you basically press this button and just kind of nuke whatever is in your way. On top of the spells that you choose to use, you also have customization in your skill tree. Now, showing on screen is going to be the skill tree, for which there's 3 sections of. You've got the green skill tree, the blue skill tree, and the red skill tree. The red skill tree focuses on armor, close range damage, knockback, and dealing melee damage. The green tree is focused on regaining your life, being quick, blinking around, high fire rate, and also gaining back mana when you're using your spells to cast some of your other bigger spells. And the blue tree is focused on long range damage. It's focused on shields and also doing your big AoE blast with your rock attack. The way I personally spec'd for my time playing was into the green tree. I liked being mobile. I liked using the fast green magic. And with the skill tree loadout that I had, even though I only had limited points, I was able to blink around more. And then when I would blink, which is a movement dash ability, I would get armor and I would increase my damage. And then I increased the damage of green magic. And I also made the green magic mana spending ability do damage over time, which led to a pretty fast and frantic playstyle. Now, all of this sounds great on paper, but how does the game actually feel to play? And this is where I'm going to get a little bit into kind of my impressions and opinions on the game. Now, I was able to sit down with the lead combat designer and have a little bit of an interview with him, and he talked about one of the biggest challenges with designing this game and the combat for it was that people know how guns work. They know what to expect. There's a certain satisfying feeling you get from shooting a weighty gun in a video game. You get the kickback, you get the recoil, you get the reaction on the enemy. And how do they do that when you're shooting magic from your hand? How do you get that same satisfying feeling? And I think they really nailed the weight of the spells and how the enemies react to getting hit by these spells. In terms of transitioning from Call of Duty to Magic, I think they did a really good job. However, the biggest thing that's lacking here for me is a reason to play and use all these tools that they're giving you. For example, I played a lot of the most recent Doom games. There's always a reason for why you're swapping to certain weapons, or why you're using your flamethrower, or why you're going in for an execution. Everything has a purpose, and there's so many things in this game that have a purpose, but never really require you or are asking you to use those things. Yes, there's matching with using your spells against the enemies with the right shield color, but besides that, I just found myself shooting whatever spell was in my hand. I would shoot the blue one until I had to reload, and then I would just swap to the green one. There wasn't really much thought, and I kind of just held up my shield and shot spells at things and would move on. The big caveat to that is I just played the very beginning intro levels, so I was only fighting the intro enemies, and I'm hoping as you play through the game, the enemy diversity increases and the challenge of the enemies increases so that you've got enemies that are charging at you, so you have to use the slows, or enemies that have got big wind-up attacks so that you need to stun them before they get those things out. And if the difficulty ramps up, it'll feel better to use all those tools. Now, in terms of my opinions on the rest of the game, I thought it was solid. I enjoyed the bits of story content that I got to see and wanted to learn more about the story. The visuals of it definitely were over the top cinematic. It did remind me a bit of my time playing Godfall with how flashy and vibrant everything is. For performance, when the game was holding a solid 60 FPS at 4K resolution, it felt and played great. However, during the heavier combat scenarios and sometimes in the more foresty area, I was noticing some drops below 60 FPS. This was an earlier build, so hopefully they get the frame rates fixed. They did say that they plan on launching this game with 60 FPS on the newer gen consoles, which is great to hear. All in all, I enjoyed my time on Immortals of Aveum. When the game was doing what it does best, which is high intensity, fluid, and weighty spell combat, it felt great. However, there were some issues with performance, some issues that I was hoping are resolved later with the depth of the combat, and also I was hoping for a little bit more in terms of the story. We'll see how that plays out later on. But what I think is most important here is that this team is doing something fresh in the FPS genre, which has been lacking innovation, honestly, for quite a while with all of the free-to-play battle royale things. This felt like a genuine fresh take, and if you're looking for an FPS game that is a more single-player focused, if you liked Ratchet and Clank, if you liked BioShock, those more single-player shooter experiences, I think this is definitely one to keep an eye out for. We'll see how the story plays out and how combat evolves at the higher levels once you start getting legendary pieces of gear, if that creates more intricacies in your combat. But I'm hopeful for this one, and we'll see how it plays out. Guys, that is going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks again to EA for sponsoring this video. Honestly, I think with this game, the story is going to be make or break. They talked to me about this game not having an end game or a new game plus. So if that story experience is worth playing, then this is going to be one to pick up. But we don't know how the story is going to be yet. But yeah, guys, that is it for the video. I'll catch y'all in the next one, guys. Take care. Peace.